We are April and Scott, creators of NaughtyGym.com, and this is the Naughty Gym Show.
For years, we've been fitness and nutrition coaches to thousands of people through our commercial gyms and online platform. We've also spent nearly a decade in an ever-evolving open relationship.
This show brings together two of our biggest passions, fitness and sex positivity. Our mission is to maximize the physical and mental health of anyone brave enough to explore relationship structures that run counter to societal norms.
We have demolished our old ways of thinking about relationships, and from that rubble, built a life full of happiness, adventure, and vitality. And now we want to help you do the same.
So hop on the treadmill, start the show, and let us teach you how to never stop playing.
Hi, April.
Is that how you want to start? Just hi, April.
Yeah, well, it's been so long.
I haven't seen you. We are extremely late putting out a podcast. And why is that, Scott?
We have been incredibly busy. We've been traveling and going, and it's just been crazy fun. But
traveling more than we typically like to.
Yeah. But we do, before we get to the show, we've got a great guest today. We're going to be interviewing Gabrielle Kassel, and she's just a wonderful sex educator, fitness expert, author, or journalist, and it's a great interview. But we want to talk about some things, since it's been a while since we put out an episode. It's been a month. Some of the things that have been going on. And first up is our next big trip. Well, it's not our next one. The next one's Be Better at Being Bad in January.
Yeah, but this is one that's going to sell out before Be Better at Being Bad. This is our trip to El Salvador, Escape to El Salvador, and it is May 7th through the 12th of 2025. We only have 28 rooms that we're booking, 30 rooms total, but we're going to be taking 2 of them with our host couples. 6 of them already sold. And so
we just started promoting.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to go to El Salvador with us in 2025, this is going to be a lifestyle trip unlike any other. It's going to have more of a holistic and wellness spin to it. You're going to leave feeling connected, rejuvenated, refreshed. But you're also going to have some really cool parties and excursions.
Yeah, this is a resort. It's very different than anything we've ever been to. It's black sand beaches. There's no other commercial enterprises on either side of it for as far as you can see. No resorts, no restaurants. It is completely in the middle of nowhere, and it is unbelievable to look at.
It's incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, and we're staying in tree houses and bungalows, and it's all 5-star, but very jungle, rustic, chic. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's just an incredible place. So if you're interested, please go to our website. There's more information there. There's a highlight video. We've been posting about it on social media, but if you're interested in going, you'll click a little link button on the website to hop on a Zoom with us so we can answer questions and kind of tell you all about the details.
Yeah, we scheduled these smaller retreats or trips through Zoom. And the reason why is there's only 28 rooms. It's a very small group that we're bringing with us. And we want to make sure that we have all of your questions answered before you put a deposit down. But we also want to make sure that everybody who's going is eyes wide open. Like, you know what's actually happening at the parties. You know what our values are. And we want to make sure that your values align with ours, frankly, because we would hate for somebody to get in another country and show up to this trip and be like, well, we didn't realize this was going on, or, we weren't sure what to expect. So we want to make sure that you can navigate your expectations properly.
And what else did we just get done doing?
We had our soiree what month? I don't even know what month it is. It's May. We had our soiree in April. And Coach Tara and Matt came all the way from Portland. We had people fly in. I was shocked. We had people fly in from North Dakota, Indianapolis, drive down from Chicago,
Texas,
Houston, Texas. I mean, to come to
a little local get together in Alabama.
But it was an incredible event. The goal for this event was a little bit different than most of your lifestyle or swinger type parties. I wanted to see what would happen if we eliminated the playroom. So there, people who maybe were newer to the lifestyle or to swinging could come and feel the weight and the pressure of those daunting playrooms released, right? So you're walking into an environment where there's no expectations because there's no playrooms. You can dress up and not have to like strip down. I don't like going to a place where I'm really dressed up and then have to take my dress off and like.
Well, and we did it in this incredibly upscale, super nice venue that was in the middle of downtown Huntsville, so that if you did make that connection, you're within walking distance of 20 different hotels.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally were in the shadow of multiple hotels. And so the playrooms didn't seem to really be an issue with anybody because people could just walk to their hotel room anyway. And it was in this venue that was so much nicer than some of the typical weekend venues that you might go to an event at. And it really was a great experience for us. And we're going to be doing it again.
Yeah. We had the free meet and greet at a martini bar the night before the soiree. And then the soiree was the next day. And it was a huge success. The people that were working the bar said it was their favorite event that they have ever had at that venue.
Yeah.
So very, very cool to hear that.
Be Better Being Bad is filling up. We're way ahead of where we were last year. I think last year we ended up selling 214 of the 250 or 60 rooms we had available. We have sold probably more rooms at this point this year than we had sold by the fall of last year leading up to it. So
this will be a sellout this year.
If you're interested in going to Hedonism, it maybe what we think is the most unique event of the year, one of the handful of complete resort takeovers they have on the calendar for all of 2025. Please go to our website and look at the information and book your room, because there's not very many of the nude side beach rooms left.
Yeah. And here's the thing if you've never been to Hedo, or you've never been to Desire, you've never been to a lifestyle resort, this is a good week to go. Last year, over half of our attendees were brand new to Hedo, and a lot of them booked 2025 before they even left our week last year. So it's a very inclusive group. We are a fitness organization, right? We're a health and coaching platform, but you aren't required to look any type of way. We had every demographic, every age, every size, everything you can imagine. Everybody was welcome, and nobody felt left out or less than, or that they weren't fit enough.
Right.
Fitness isn't an aesthetic. It's a mindset. It's a core value. It's the way you live your life. It's a growth mindset. And as long as you have those values, you're going to have a great time.
And through the education, the educators that we had there, we had so many comments from people who were new to Hedo or the lifestyle in general, saying this helped me so much to sort of understand how to get started in this consensual non-monogamy type lifestyle. But we also had incredible huge parties at night too. So it's a great environment for new people or experienced people. Yeah.
We actually talked to a couple last night who's coming to El Salvador with us, but was also at Hedo for Be Better at Being Bad Week. And they said last night that was their third trip to Hedo that they came with us. And they said it was by far their favorite, because they still left the week, even though they partied, feeling rejuvenated. They felt more connected. They made deeper friendships. So it wasn't just about have sex and party. They made really good connections with people that they hadn't had a chance to do at their previous trips. So we think that you will enjoy it as much as everyone else.
You have something big coming up here in the fall.
I do.
Something you haven't done in 2 decades.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me feel really old, but it's true. The last time, I'm competing in a figure competition in September in Orange Beach, Alabama, an NPC show. I haven't competed since my second son was 18 months old, I think, and he is now in his 20s. So it's been almost 2 decades. I committed to this because I need a goal to work towards. I need something on my calendar to keep me accountable. I hired a coach because I think everyone needs a coach. Coaches need coaches. you need somebody to hold your feet to the fire. And so I'm loving the journey so far. I'm already seeing great results. My body responding quicker than I anticipated it responding. But I'm also along the way designing my own track of functional bodybuilding for Naughty Gym. And so it's just something that I love to do anyways. So that will be available here probably in the next month or so.
And speaking of needing coaches, so April and I are always available for one-on-one coaching for anybody that needs kind of a higher level of accountability and support and help. But we've also hired another coach to our staff, Coach Cara, who has been on the podcast a couple of times. And, she is a incredibly well-rounded coach, and that she not only knows how to coach through fitness, but has some certifications in kin stretch and different mobility type programs. And she's a great resource. So if you need a coach, she's available. She's on our website. You can book through her.
She's worked with some like NFL athletes. She currently is getting ready to work with some AFL athletes. I mean, she knows her shit. She works with people to strengthen their pelvic floor, which translates to a higher fitness level, because you have to have a strong pelvic floor, better orgasms, yeah, all of that. And it's not just women that need a strong pelvic floor. She works with men as well. So if you need accountability, if you need coaching, if you need help with nutrition, she's also a nutrition coach. Go to our website, naughtygym.com, and you can click on one-on-one coaching and you can choose your coach. And she is one of the options that you can choose.
And she and I are both working together on a new program that will be in addition to the functional bodybuilding program you're doing. We're doing a program that is a combination of cardiovascular work and mobility work that is designed specifically to be tacked on to the Naughty Gym program to help you maximize weight loss in a short period of time, and to do it in a way that's very healthy on your joints and, to keep you injury free. A lot of times when we try to really maximize body transformation over a short period of time, we tack too much of the wrong stuff into a program. This is going to help alleviate that problem. So that'll be coming very soon as well.
Yeah.
Last thing before we get to the show, we had an experiment a few months ago, 6 months, maybe a year.
I think it's been a year now.
Yeah, whatever it was, we were going to try separate dating. We ended up, through some ups and downs, we ended up going on separate dates with two very good friends of ours, and went really well. But we have put the brakes on that because we've just been so busy selling the gym and all this other stuff. And we've kind of opened back up that window of possibility again. And you already have one lined up.
I don't have a date lined up.
Well,
so I have a guy that I'm chatting with. His schedule is incredibly busy as well, though. And so I don't think either one of us are really pushing super hard. I think we're just kind of like, if the stars align, we'll go on a date.
But this is a rather attractive.
He's very attractive.
Individual.
Very attractive. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, we've been so busy lately, and we've had a lot of family stuff. We have a lot of family stuff coming up. I have a son that's graduating from Navy boot camp, so we'll be traveling for that. So, I'm not pushing anything.
And I do not.
You have one separate date.
Yeah. So we went to a circuit party,
right?
A gay circuit party, and met a couple of guys. It was a huge event. And we met a couple of guys who really matched our energy. We liked them, hit it off, but turns out they were not in an open relationship.
Right.
And through a series of messages after the event was over, they had kind of talked about the possibility, after a year of being in a closed relationship, of opening it up if I was interested, which made me nervous. And, but one of them is a really well-known DJ and is going to be DJing an event in Orlando, one of the largest LGBTQ events in the country. It's like 6,000 people. It's at Disney World. And so they invited me to go as their third, which I have never done anything remotely close to this. And I just agreed.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a chicken about it. So I'm actually going to Orlando with two guys to spend a weekend at an event there. And
And nothing may happen. You may just hang out and have a good time, or something may happen.
Yeah, who knows?
You're open to possibilities. And while you're there, I'm going to be here in our hometown, volunteering with the Southeastern Diversity Project, hosting the second annual Pride event in our small city here in Alabama. So it's our first Pride parade. And so I'll be distracted doing that. And I'm actually, our LGBTQ community here in our small town has really been super supportive of us. And it makes me just tear up thinking about it. But I am honored to just help them that weekend. So that's where I will be.
So we've been incredibly busy. In fact, as soon as we get done videoing this intro to the podcast, we're heading to Nashville to visit with some friends. So it's been busy. We apologize for it being a month for getting an episode out, but we should be back on track now.
And the next episode is going to be just me on my own. I've got some,
after this one.
I've got some stuff to say.
Well, all right. So thanks for the kind of update on our life. And now we will get to the show and our interview with Gabrielle Kassel.
Enjoy, guys. Welcome back to the Naughty Gym Show. Today we have a very special guest that we've been so excited. We've been looking forward to this for over a month. We have Gabrielle Kassel with us. She is a sex and fitness journalist who writes at the intersection of queerness, sexual health, pleasure, and sports. And she has works that have been published in Shape, Health, Cosmo. She's a very pronounced in her field. And we are so excited to have her with us. Welcome, Gabby. We'll call you Gabby today.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so we have, we stumbled across you through some articles you wrote. Well, in particular, one, I think you wrote an article about a friend of ours, Kate Gordon.
Yes.
And who's been to one of our events too very recently. But and so it's been interesting because we keep finding more and more people who at least are somewhat at this intersection of sexual health and wellness, fitness and sex. And so it's always great for us to try to reach out and connect because we share so many common interests. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I always say that I feel like my CrossFit world and then my queer sex education world exist in two totally different spheres and they never intersect. The Venn diagram is just two circles. So when it does intersect and I get to chat with folks with you, I get really excited. So we
feel the same way. We do.
And you would think it wouldn't be that way. You've got CrossFit folks who, especially the competitive ones, they're all young, full of energy, and CrossFit is making this huge push into influencing the health industry in general. And so it seems like a fertile ground for this intersection of sexual health along with physical health. But you're right. Even in our lives, it's just a topic people aren't comfortable discussing.
And I will say that, and maybe you experience this too, when folks in the CrossFit field know what I do, they will pull me aside and want to have really intimate conversations with me about their concerns and their bodies. But it isn't until they have that door, that entry point, that welcome, come talk to me sort of entry that they will actually want to talk about those subjects.
Right. Well, they need to know that there's a safe place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's we get a lot of that. We either come here, I want to talk to you real quick about something. And then it starts awkwardly like, now, I hope this isn't awkward or offensive or anything. Or we get a lot of the private messages, email type things. People just struggle to have these conversations in the light of day.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, though, especially in the CrossFit world where people are chasing health and wellness? And I feel like they tend to be a little more open-minded. Why do you think that people are still struggling to have that conversation?
I think generally our understanding of health is somewhat limited, right? We are just now starting to see mental health as part of health. And I think before we were primarily defining health as physical fitness and cardiovascular measures and blood markers and things like that. And I don't know if we are quite yet globally in a space where we are recognizing that sexual health and well-being are also part of that health bucket.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of that changed
through the pandemic though? Like people started, maybe it was they had alone time to listen to podcasts or read or really kind of explore themselves a little bit more. Did you find that to be true coming out of the pandemic? It kind of opened up a little bit.
I think that there's been such a focus on health in general that maybe folks are more likely to think about sex as being part of that umbrella term. But I'm still finding that folks really aren't ready yet, maybe, to recognize that sexual health is really part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really it's a sign of a healthy relationship. It doesn't mean you have to have some vibrant sex life to be in a healthy relationship, but it's usually an offshoot of that. And it's also a sign that your body is healthy. Somebody that has an active libido is usually, in general, a healthy person. And,
Right.
and so while you don't have to be some huge fan of sex in general, it is usually a sign that things are clicking along pretty well for you in your life.
Yeah, I always say that your libido is like a check engine light. So it is constantly giving you information about yourself and your body, right? We all kind of have what we have as our norm or our normal interest in sex. And whenever it deviates from that, that is likely giving us information about the rest of our health. So it could be the health of our relationship. It could be the health of our relationship to our bodies. It could be medicine that we're on, or sickness or immune system or anything. So I always say whenever your libido kind of fluctuates from your personal norm or usual, that is data for you on your health.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Well, so you do journalism, you do CrossFit, you are an activist of sorts for the LGBTQ community. How did all of this come about? Which came first? What and how did this intersection become part of such a big part of your life?
Great. Yeah, great question. So I've always been queer. I came out as queer when I was in high school, and I've always been an athlete. I played soccer, swimming, and track in high school, went on to play rugby in college. So in school, for my undergraduate degree, I majored in women's studies with a focus on queer health and well-being, and also English. When I graduated undergrad, my first job was actually at Women's Health magazine. And when I entered the career force, I was really interested in writing stories about queer people in general. And I had gone to Smith College, which is a women's college, which is very queer inclusive community. And so I naively thought, well, I've just been hired by Women's Health magazine. This is my dream job. They are for sure going to let me write about the queer topics that I want to write about. And I'm not even talking about kind of queer sex topics. I'm talking about things like how to know if I'm gay, how to have a family with another woman, what does the IVF process look like, things like that. But at the time when I entered the realm of journalism, basically these magazines' point of view was, well, 10% of the population is queer or gay. So we're not going to put out an article on these gay topics because only 10% of our readership might read it. And so from their point of view, sure, there's a service element there, but it is automatically a less profitable article to commission than something on something like, kinky sex tips or how to please your man or blowjob tips and things like that. And so I was really disgruntled my first year in the field, really feeling like, wow, I have this passion and I'm just not sure how I'm going to be able to write about it. And so because I was also interested in fitness, what I started to do was primarily write and pitch stories in the realm of fitness, be it strength training tips or creatine information or thoughts on body positivity within the realm of sports. But at the end of all of my emails to my editors, I would always say, hey, I also have this kind of queer forward idea. Let me know if you end up being interested. And so after a year of having that last idea get rejected and rejected and rejected, there was a change in Google that allowed me and gave me an entry point to write about those topics. So essentially what happened is at the end of 2016, the beginning of 2017, Google said, hey, when people type in things like lesbian sex or anal sex or girl on girl kissing, we don't want porn and Pornhub to be the first thing that populates our search results. Instead, we want informational articles on how to do that kind of sex safely to pop up. And so for the first time, these magazines who historically thought, well, no one's going to read this queer sex article, this anal sex article, had impetus to be posting informational articles on that topic. And so because I had been pitching kind of queer forward themes since the beginning of my career, all of my editors were like, hey, this might be a little bit outside of your comfort zone. It's spicier than the kinds of things you were originally pitching, but we know you're interested in queer things. How do you feel about writing this queer sex article? So I said yes to one, and then I said yes to two. And then because all of the publications use a lot of the same freelance database and know each other, I kind of became the person who these companies were hiring to write these queer sex 101 guides. And so I really fell into this niche as a result of like internet Google luck combined with just a passion that editors recognize that I have. So since then, I've really made a career for myself, primarily writing about queer sex.
Wow, I love that. That's an amazing journey. You just chase your passion, and it's going to come. The universe will bring it.
Yeah, and I do feel, I love the way you say luck, because I feel like a lot of the things that have worked out for us, I mean, we work hard, but there's been some things where I've just felt lucky to have been given that opportunity, and it didn't feel like it was so much the hard work that we were doing, it's just that we happened to be in the right time in the right place, that sort of thing. But but you're primarily a writer. That's your livelihood, right?
Yes.
And you started CrossFit quickly out of college, or was it in college?
I started CrossFit as soon as my college rugby career ended. It ended. I had an identity crisis around who am I without sports. I was kind of a gym bro for like 3 months. And then somebody who I'd met at the big box gym, being a gym bro, was like, hey, you should come to a CrossFit class with me. And the first workout was a bench press and push-up workout, which was my meat and potatoes at the time. Still, my bench press is like strangely my best lift. And so I was like, I'm in, I'm good at this. Let's keep it going. And it ended up being not just like a way for me to meet my competitive energy needs in a healthy way. It also became like my community in New York City. I had just moved to New York after college. I didn't really have friends. And then suddenly I was seeing the same 20 faces every day at the 7 p.m. CrossFit class. And those became my people, my family.
Yeah. So you being in New York, I'm just going to assume you didn't face a whole lot of backlash over being a queer writer or part of the queer community in general. But that's how we view things in the South about the North. Like, I just assume it's all okay up there. But was there any of that, or was it just easy peasy? It doesn't matter.
I think a few things. I think one, I was working in environments that were choosing to hire me to write on those topics and therefore respecting me for the knowledge that I have in them. And two, outside of those specific contexts, I really pass as a straight person, right? A person's not going to see me and clock me as other. And so I do have this privilege of being able to like maneuver the subway or maneuver the streets as a person who is not necessarily visually identifiable as queer based on stereotypes of what people think queer folks look like. Sure. So, day to day, no, didn't face much discrimination. Definitely was the only queer person at my box at the time. But I think that was just based on where I was or maybe the class I was taking. There's also a specific gym in New York that is kind of known for calling forth the gays. That's where a lot of the gay community went. And I just didn't go there because it wasn't as convenient for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have. I know there's one in New Orleans that's the same way, and we almost went one time when we were on vacation to check it out. And it's very different for us. I mean, if you as a LGBTQ person in small town Alabama, you're going to face backlash. Once it got known in our community that we were consensually non-monogamous, within a 2-month period, we lost half of our gym membership. Just started quitting.
Oh, wow.
Left and right. So a little different here.
Right. Well, and then he was outed as bisexual, and that we took another hit.
Yeah, that didn't help either.
I think they were almost better with us being non-monogamous than bisexual. Mm-hmm. It was just...
And probably better with both of those than finding out we were atheists.
Well, both of those identities are threatening to what is considered the norm, right?
Yeah.
And so people, I think it really, people get afraid when they hear that other people are able to have happy, fulfilling, loving lives outside of the the thing that they think they need to be secure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so you, at some point, you started writing on the queer issues, but you also got picked up to write, and I don't know if this came first or second, but like you're writing for Morning Chalk Up still, I think, right? And some of the fitness outlets. Which of those came first? You started writing heavily in the queer segment or in the fitness segment?
Sure. So I was writing about fitness because I couldn't get my queer stories approved.
Right.
Then there was this rush where I was only writing basically about sex and queer sex. And then there came a point where I was like, okay, I love writing about fitness. Let's find a way to find a better balance between these two. So these days, I'd say what I write is probably 60% in the sex field and about 40% in the fitness field. So for me, that's a really great percentage breakdown. It allows me to write about CrossFit and fitness for publications like Morning Chalk Up, while also allowing me to do the kind of sex education work in writing that I really like to do.
Has CrossFit HQ ever reached out, hey, we would like to have you help us in this area? In our, we had the big fiasco a few years ago with racial tension, and which ended up leading to Glassman's retiring. Is this an area where they've ever reached out to say, hey, can you help us in some capacity?
No, but I will say a few years ago, I went to the games and I had some great conversations with folks with CrossFit Health. But since then, they have not been receiving quite as much funding, and just the momentum that they once had has died down. So definitely would be something I'm interested in. I'm not sure how receptive the CrossFit community would be, given the things that we've already said about, the misunderstanding around sexual health being health versus not.
Right.
I also think that there's a way that CrossFit as a sport and doing CrossFit alongside other people can feel really sexually charged, whether or not people want to name it as that or not, right? You're pushing yourself to your limit. You're making grunting noises. You're sweating. Clothes are coming off. And so I wonder if people are shying away from talking about sexual health in CrossFit spaces out of fear that it's going to overtly sexualize what has become their safe space and not wanting to do that. And I actually think that's really fair, right? In some ways, that is just saying, hey, I have a boundary. I don't want to overly sexualize my CrossFit box or my CrossFit space or my fitness routine.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For the sake of our business, that it goes exactly the opposite. That people do want to. But I think there is that fear of over-sexualizing something is a fear that shouldn't be there. People are so scared of the topic of sex as if it's some mystical, and a lot of this blame, I think, falls on the religious people that make it such a taboo topic. But I hate how difficult it is to have conversations about this subject. And you can feel it in the room if the subject comes up in front of people. You can feel the tension, and that one of the reasons we do this podcast is because we hope to kind of just help normalize it, to make it a conversation that is easier to have and doesn't feel so taboo. But I'm shocked that you feel like it was that way or has been that way in the Northeast. I would just assumed it was much easier.
I definitely feel supported in what I do. I don't feel discriminated against when I walk into my CrossFit box. And also, I still give disclaimers for folks who meet me in CrossFit spaces when I give them my Instagram handle. Hey, just so you know, I'm a sexual health journalist. There might be some things on there that surprise you. No hard feelings at all if you give me an unfollow. And some folks will choose to unfollow, and the ones who don't will say, "Oh, I love that you're doing this. Like, this is great. This is super informative."
Yeah.
I do think, to your comment about your hope of what CrossFit spaces become and how normalized sexual conversations hopefully do evolve into. I do think people want that in some part of themselves, right? The conversations that I'm having with people in one-on-one settings suggest that. Like, people are really looking for ways to get their questions answered, to find out if they are normal. And also, I don't know if they yet have the language, if we yet have the language as a society to talk about sex in group spaces without it feeling shamey or pushy or judgmental or sort of any of those other negative emotions that people really want to avoid introducing into their sex lives.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about what you're doing and like what Kate Gordon is doing and putting it out on social media, as people can see these are
real athletes, incredibly intelligent women who are embracing a side of themselves that a lot of people are afraid to embrace. And you're allowing people to start that dialogue. I think that's a beautiful thing.
You know, the most common questions I get, and I'll keep it kind of very gendered. Men ask me, hey, is it normal that I can't get hard? And a lot of times the answer is no. You know, that is giving you information that you are probably training too hard and not recovering enough. And the question that women most commonly ask me is, hey, I'm experiencing pain during penetration, or I'm leaking during double unders. Are either of those things normal? And the answer to both of those is no. Both of those are a sign that there is some pelvic floor dysfunction happening. And I think being able to talk about both of those sexual health things would improve the overall health of the people asking those questions. Because for the former example, we're suggesting that maybe overtraining is at play, under recovering, not getting enough nutrients. And in the latter example, we're suggesting that, hey, maybe the pelvic floor, which is a muscle that gets worked either properly or improperly in CrossFit, is not being trained the way that it needs to support your reproductive organs.
Right. And so, you know, we've been in CrossFit for, 13, 14 years, but just that I pee when I do double unders became such a normal thing, but there was t-shirts about it and nobody was addressing like, why is this not okay?
Right.
And it wasn't until even myself this past year that I met somebody who was a pelvic floor specialist that addressed the issue. And I was like, I thought this was just, I have had kids and this is a normal thing. But then there was girls in their early 20s in our gym that was having the same issue that didn't have children. And so being able to get that information and feel like this is a normal thing, but there's ways that we can address it and fix it. I'm like, oh my God, where has this information been? And why aren't more people talking about it?
And also think about how much better the coaching cues could be if coaches had access to this information too.
Right.
Because part of what's happening when folks are peeing themselves or losing control of their bladders is that, let me backtrack. So the pelvic floor muscles are part of the core. And in CrossFit, it is really common to hear contract your core, contract your core, contract your core. And so a lot of people with pelvic floors, men and women have pelvic floors, but primarily this is an issue that affects women or people assigned female at birth. When they hear contract their core, they squeeze their core muscles and their pelvic floor muscles, and they get really good at contracting them. But they get so good at contracting them that they lose the ability or forget how or aren't practicing the art of releasing those muscles as well. And so what ends up happening is that those muscles get locked in a contracted position, similar to how like Popeye's bicep gets locked in a contracted position when he's walking around with that big, juicy, lumpy bicep. And as a result of that, excuse me, I got a call. I'm not sure. Did you hear that noise?
No.
Okay, I'll start over. As a result of that, those muscles get so tight that they're not able to contract further to keep urine from leaking out, or they have become locked in that position and cannot loosen, which results in penetrative sexual pain or penetrative pain of any kind.
Yeah.
And so think about how different the coaching cues might be if a coach knows that information and knows that this is an issue that really affects people that have pelvic floors, aka all of us.
Right.
You know, rather than consistently being like, engage your core, pull your belly button into your spine, they might then also say, okay, now relax your core. And just teaching people how to engage those muscles differently and ultimately better.
This is a course that CrossFit HQ needs to offer for their coaches. You know, they've got mobility and all the different ones. They need a pelvic floor health seminar.
Yeah, I fully agree.
We did a virtual one with Cara, who she's talking about, and we've now hired with Naughty Gym. But she did a virtual seminar and kind of walked people through the process of how to contract it properly, how to relax, that sort of thing. And, we've been coaching CrossFit for 13, 14 years. I've never even heard the topic brought up until maybe a year ago. And I still don't think I would have any idea how to integrate that into a CrossFit class. That's how bad the education on that topic is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something I was aware of until I totally messed up my pelvic floor as a result of basically doing CrossFit badly or incorrectly,
Right.
and then had to remedy that and learn how through my own body, how to fix that issue and keep it from happening again.
Yeah, going back to the you brought up the men's primary question you get is centered around erection issues. In our space, the non-monogamy space, I think that conversation is a little easier to have because it's not always, or maybe even primarily, health related. Often it's just, oh my goodness, this crazy scenario I'm in tonight on a Saturday night, and you've got all this stuff swirling around in your head. Can oftentimes cause erection issues where you may not have them any other place. We don't know how many times we've heard that I've never had an erection issue with my spouse, and now all of a sudden there's some extra element, another person involved. I think it's an open conversation more so in the consensual non-monogamy space, but it's still not something my guy friends would ever ask me about, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is that like in group sex spaces, I think the part of the conversation is there's a limited understanding of like what qualifies as sex, right? There's kind of this pressure that in order for it to be sex, there has to be a hard penis. And so like my anxiety now is that there's no hard penis, and therefore how are we going to have sex? So like I think some of that is like, you know, how would broadening your understanding of sex relieve the anxiety that is coming up in group sex spaces? And I think for CrossFit, there's kind of this, like, on the other hand, there's just maybe a lack of understanding of how important the ability to have an erection is, like, for a person, and how it really can tell you if something is up with your body. So, right, in one case, I think it is a limiting idea around sex that is commonly the cause. And the other case, I think there's often something really hormonally funkily up that is causing the issue.
Yeah. Well, how did you so you do sex educate, like you're taking sex, or already a certified sex coach, I think. I don't know. I read some of this stuff, but what is the goal for you when it comes to being a sex educator? Is it just mainstreaming the conversation, or is it technique and more granular things like that as well?
Yeah. So my big goal is I want people to have access to information that allows them to have the kind of sex they want in the way that is as pleasurable and as safe as possible. And that means any kind of sex. That means hand sex. That means oral sex. That means penetrative sex, anal, vaginal, group sex, solo sex, all of that. All of those different kinds of sex, I want people to be able to have in a way that is feeling good and also is safe, both for their physical anatomy and also for their sexual health status.
You know, we got to, when we get done with the episode today, we got to talk to you about we had one major event in Jamaica where we brought these sex educators from around the world there to a hedonism resort. And we're looking at possibly doing another one here inside the continental United States. So we'll have to have a conversation with you about that. But
I saw those photos, and I consider so many of those educators my peers and like my non-traditional coworkers. So very fun that you've gotten to meet all of them. I mean, they're all just genius.
Yeah,
we were so fortunate just to even be around that level of people. That week was really a magical week for everybody. It was something else. All right, so one of the conversations I wanted to have was, a few years back, CrossFit opened up the competitive sport side of CrossFit to transgender athletes. Honestly, I haven't rechecked to see if there's been major changes with that, but it did cause quite a controversy when it came up. With the common things that you would expect. Well, this is a huge advantage for a woman who has transitioned, a man who has transitioned into being a woman. Would she not have this huge advantage going into a sport where strength is one of the primary components? And, where we live, it is an incredibly divisive topic where probably 90% of our community would be very anti-transgender sport issues. So give us some insight. I know you had some, education in this area in college. Talk to us at first about why it may not be as simple as there's just two genders.
Sure. So I guess to start, we should talk about sex. And sex is basically what your genitals look like. And when you come out of the womb and you are born, the doctor looks at your genitals. And if you have a penis, say, this is a boy. And if you have a vagina, say, this is a girl. And that is sex, right? But actually, those two categories, it's not as simple as just the two of them. There's also a third thing that can happen called intersex, which is where a person has some reproductive organs associated with sort of men or males, and some reproductive organs associated with women or females. So typically in that instance, somebody might have a biological penis, but have uterus and fallopian tubes, or the opposite, have a vagina, but have testes sort of tucked inside of their body. Mm-hmm. So I think first it's important to understand that even in the conversation of sex or genitals, it is not just there are two options.
Right.
Now, next, there is something called gender. And that is essentially what society associates being with, assigned female at birth folks and assigned male at birth folks, right? For most people, womanhood, girlhood, is typically in line with their genitals, right? For these folks, we would consider them cisgender. But for other folks, that is not always the case, right? Maybe somebody is assigned female at birth and has a vagina, but really heavily identifies or is the things that we as a society associate with manhood. Mm-hmm. These folks would be transgender. So that's kind of like a trans 101 lesson.
Right. Yeah. So when people are typically saying there's only two genders, it's really a misrepresentation of what the word gender means, right? They're really saying incorrectly still, but that there's only two sexes.
Exactly. Yeah. There's this often misunderstanding that sex and gender are not synonymous, and many people treat them as they are. Yeah. And while man and woman are the two genders that are most common, gender actually does not exist in the binary of just two. Many people see it as a spectrum where there's kind of man on one side and woman on the other, and your gender can be kind of anything in between. And other people see it as a thing that it just exists and your gender can exist anywhere alongside of it, outside of even the idea of a spectrum, right? For some folks, they are agender, which means non-gender. They don't associate with gender at all. Some people are non-binary, which they see as being either a combination of man and woman or as neither man or woman. Ultimately, it depends on how folks identify themselves and also like what the specific words that they're using mean to the person who's using it.
Okay, so does that mean that gender, properly understood, the definition of gender is a self-identification?
Correct.
Okay, because I don't think that that's how I would have understood it 10 years ago. And I don't think that's how it's typically understood, at least in our community.
Oh, no, not in our community.
But if it's a self-identification, then it has nothing to do with biology, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so it's just so it's how you feel about yourself. So when people get all bent out of shape about there's only two genders and somebody, I think I got it. I'm asking questions out of pure ignorance, by the way, in case you can't.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, please keep asking them.
So let's go to the competitive sport issue, because this is the part, I have found myself as I've gotten older, I get more and more liberal in the way I think, but I'm still an athlete, and I still want the competitive playing field to be fair at all times for all people.
Sure.
And I don't know there's a good answer to this question, but how do you address the issue that it has seemed intuitively unfair for someone who was a man and maybe lived a large part of their life as a man and gained all of the biological advantages from a strength perspective that a man gets, and then they transition into being a woman?
Sure.
Is that an unbalancing of the fairness equation in sports?
Okay, before we get to sort of that specific question, I guess I want to say two things. One, people are not transitioning, meaning going from the gender that they are assumed to be because of the genitals that they are born with to another gender because they want some advantage in sports, right? That is not what people are doing. Their transition is outside of the realm in sport. It is not ill-intentioned. It is not designed to dock somebody else's sports capabilities. It is not designed to mess up leaderboards. People are doing that because it is who they are and it is how they can live most as themselves.
And that, just on that point, we have a friend. The process is not an easy thing. It's emotional. You can lose family and friends. And for people to say that this is happening for an advantage in a sport is ludicrous to me.
Yeah. And to that point, April, like the other thing I wanted to say is I'm happy to have this conversation. I think it's important because people in our sport and other sports are having it. And I ultimately think it is a distraction from the things that we should be talking about. And that is, hey, why don't trans people have access to healthcare?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, why are there so many homeless trans youth? Hey, what can somebody who is trans do to access the medical care that they deserve and need to survive?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost as if this issue functions as a catalyst for further hatred of the transsexual community. It's like, here is a thing that seems obviously and intuitively bad. I don't agree with that, but that's what a lot of people think. And I can use this to help leverage my already this hatred that I have towards the transgender community. Here's a good reason for my hatred.
I think most of the information that's put out there by the media is inflammatory instead of educational. I mean, the headlines are, not doing anything to educate people.
Right. And I mean, ultimately, the question of, is it fair, is you're asking the question, is it fair to cisgender people who have all of the privilege in the world, especially in comparison to trans folks? And I don't really think that's the question. I think the better question is, what do trans folks lose if they do not have the ability to exercise with and compete with and do sports with the people who are their gender, right? If we say, hey, you can't do sports with other women because you were assigned male at birth and you are living your life as a woman or as a girl, you are saying to that person, you can't be part of teams, you can't be part of communities. And, oh, by the way, we're not actually recognizing you as a woman, which is how you are living every minute of your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I feel like, ultimately you're asking a question about how it affects cisgender people who have all of the privilege in the world without actually thinking about transgender folks as humans who are deserving of community and care and exercise to fitness spaces.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I'm just going to play devil's advocate because I can already hear the retorts from some people that somebody who is transgender, and again, please understand, I'm saying this the way I think somebody would say it to me. This doesn't represent the way I think about the topic necessarily, but that somebody who is transgender has chosen that route to take in their life. And, some guy who lived his life or some person who lived their life as a male and maybe a bodybuilding male and has huge muscles and then spends the next couple years going through hormone treatments to become a woman, still has major advantages, physical advantages over the other fit female athletes in his chosen sport. Okay, now I think I know some answers to some of those things, but you're probably going to do a lot better job than I would of answering them. So what do you think, or what do you say to somebody who brings that topic up?
That ultimately most of the governing sports bodies who are making the decisions around when a trans athlete can compete with the gender that they are keeping that in mind, right? Most of the athletes in sports other than CrossFit, it's primarily recreational outside of the semifinal and games level athletes are requiring hormone testing, right? To make sure that folks have hormone levels that is quote unquote in line with other people of that biological sex or that gender. So there are protocols in place to keep somebody from having a quote unquote unfair advantage from a hormonal standpoint, right? And we're even seeing that the idea of a hormonal normal is backfiring even on cisgender athletes who are being dubbed things like, genetic freaks or endocrinologically superior as a result of, for example, just being born naturally, genetically with more testosterone, right? And so even these governing bodies might say, the right amount of testosterone for someone to have to compete in the woman category is X to Z. And sometimes there are even cisgender women, right, who have never been men, have never taken testosterone, have never used steroids, whose levels exist outside of this level.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recognize that, I guess, for the folks who are making this kind of asinine argument, that these levels, there are rules that exist. And also these rules aren't just punishing transgender athletes. They're also punishing cisgender athletes at times.
Yeah. And one of the ways I look at this too is ultimately this is sport, and I love sports. I have played something all of my life, but when you compare the importance of sport to the importance of the well-being of the person, an argument could be made, I think, that, well, look, there's no clear, great answer here, but let's err on the side of taking care of the person before we err on the side of taking care of the level playing field of the sport. Even if somebody can make a good case that somebody might have an unfair advantage in some way or the other, we don't see that happening just, all over the place. Every event has got some transgender athlete winning. We don't see that. And unless we do, or until we do, let's just err on the side of being kind to the person and maybe a little less kind to the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. I think too, focusing on what ifs ultimately, again, detracts from the bigger issue, which is that all people, regardless of gender, deserve access to safe fitness spaces.
Yeah, to safe every place. I mean, we have right now in the state of Alabama, politicians running on the platform that they're going to keep men out of the women's bathroom. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd to me. And
we just
heartbreaking.
We just passed the law that was made fun of on Saturday Night Live about embryos are human lives. I think was the law.
Yeah.
So not a hotbed of progressive thought where we're at. Have you seen this? The last question about the transgender issue. Have you seen transgender athletes making an impact in the highest levels of CrossFit? Has that been there and I've just missed it?
That's a good question. Let me think about how I'm going to answer this. I think the answer is no, but I don't want to be blanking on. Give me a second and I'll answer. Okay, can I ask you to ask your question again? I'm ready.
Yeah. So have we seen an influx or any at the highest levels of CrossFit, maybe the semis or the CrossFit Games? Have there been any transgender athletes competing at all?
My understanding is no. And also my hope for CrossFit as a sport is that we as a community can continue to make it as welcoming to those folks as possible, so that if that ever comes to be, that person feels like they can come out as trans, so that we can have a trans role model who really shows not just cisgender people, but trans kids, right? That it is possible to be trans and also to maintain and obtain just such an impressive degree of fitness.
Yeah,
but you can almost see it if it happens. If somebody wins the CrossFit Games, it's just going to fuel the fires again of people saying, see.
But we'll also open the doors for education. That would be a fantastic thing to happen and a great opportunity for people to be educated about what that is. And like you said, transgender children having a role model to go, I have a space now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tricky, touchy subject, but definitely short on education. So that's where people like you come in, I suppose, is to help us dummies learn something. All right. Well, so what is, now that your career is really developed and you're doing journalism across these different topics, what is the biggest passion for you now? What is the thing that you wish you could focus even more time on?
Ooh, good question. I love talking about pleasure products of any kind. I love giving people tips to try them for the first time, tips for kind of climbing the hill of, I want a sex toy, but I don't know how to get there, and helping folks kind of approach pleasure products in a way that feels accessible to them. I love teaching folks how to use them in a way that feels good and is safe again. And then I love writing about non-monogamy.
So I actually watched one of your Instagram reels. I don't know how old it is, but about strap-ons, because I love using a strap-on. And you were actually talking about a product that you could put on the dildo to make it so, like, some of them are too long, some of, to kind of control it. And that was the first time I had ever seen anything like that. I'm like, immediately looking it up to go and find it. So I think that's such a fun thing to be able to teach people, but also I am with you on the fact that I know you love to wear a strap-on as well.
Yes, I do. So yeah, really my secret career goal is just to have everybody strap up.
What kind of stuff do you coach, teach, or answer questions about on the topic of non-monogamy? And how did that come up?
Yeah, sure. So if I had to put a label to myself, I'd probably say I'm ambiamorous, which means that I could be happy in a monogamous relationship or a polyamorous relationship. And so some of my interest in writing about non-monogamy comes from, personal experience and a desire to kind of normalize non-monogamous dating and non-monogamous lifestyles and non-monogamous relationships. In terms of questions that I answer, I try to spend a lot of time talking about basically ways to treat everyone who is involved in a relationship as human, right? I think that because there is so much content out there about dyadic monogamous couples opening up their relationship and how that affects the initial two people who were in the initial two-person relationship, there can be some oversight on how that can affect and impact how they show up for their additional outside of the relationship partners. Right. So I think a lot of times when people open up their relationship and they are having sex with thirds or with unicorns or with other people, they forget that those are actually also people. And so something that's really important to me is educating them and reminding everyone that people are people regardless of whether or not they were involved in the original monogamous relationship that has since opened up. And both giving the person who is outside of the relationship the tools to advocate for themselves, and also giving people who are in the original relationship an understanding that this outside person doesn't want to be a threat, and two rules around what is and isn't allowed isn't going to protect you emotionally, right? So really forcing folks to interrogate why they are making certain boundaries, quote unquote, or agreements, quote unquote, and pushing them to get just like really honest about what their fear is and whether or not that fear is the thing that is leading them to make agreements or rules rather than reality.
Yeah, there's nothing like trying to embrace some variation of non-monogamy to force you to learn every dark secret about yourself, every jealousy trigger. I mean, we've had so many conversations over the past 8 or 9 years that it is utterly shocking to find out anything that we didn't already know about each other, because we've had to have those conversations.
Well, and it's taught us how to set good boundaries, personal and relationally.
Yeah, and
it's boundaries isn't a skill that we are taught in school, right? And so it is a thing that we are really forced to navigate and learn through our interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, and when you first start exploring any version of non-monogamy, typically the boundaries are greater. Like we joke that we had a scroll that you had to unroll of all the rules that we had in place for each other when we first started, and then. We
essentially set up so many boundaries that we couldn't move.
Right.
It was impossible to have sex with us because you're going to break one of our rules somehow.
Right.
But over the years, as we've grown to trust each other and we've had so many different types of experiences, that those boundaries some of them have completely dissolved. Some of them are barely there anymore. And it really is a beautiful life because we live kind of in this in between space between what people might view as traditional swinging and the polyamorous world, where we we don't fit comfortably in either category because we really only like to play with people that we have developed a deep connection for, but we don't share our household with anybody else, so it certainly doesn't look like obvious polyamory to us either.
Sure.
All right.
Do you have any tips that you could offer people that are kind of navigating this space?
This space being the non-monogamous space, or this space?
Yeah. The non-monogamy, setting boundaries.
Yeah, sure. So I am a big fan of becoming just a relationship researcher for folks who are going to dip their toe in there. Because we don't get education on what healthy relationships look like and how to self-advocate in relationships, it's really a skill set that people are totally lacking. And it is apparent that it is lacking to us in our working relationships and our relationships with coworkers, with family, with friends, etc. And so I think your entire life will be bolstered by learning how to be in relationships. So I think any book on, be it polyamory or swinging or general relationships, on friendships, etc., will help you in navigating kind of opening up.
Yeah.
Two, I think it can be really helpful from the get-go to know what your why is, because there are going to be times when opening up and exploring polyamory is really hard. And so if you can remind yourself in these moments why it is that you are doing so, it can be helpful. So for some people, it might be because they really like sexual adventure and novelty. For me, it's that I'm really drawn to community and community-based living. For someone else, it could be that they just feel that they are overflowing with love and want to both give and receive that. I think once you can pinpoint your why, you can use that as your lighthouse when you feel like your ship is going off board. Three, I also think that, we talk a lot about how hard polyamory is, and no doubt it can be hard, right? You're learning about yourself. That can be really scary. You're learning things about your partner. That can be scary. It's uncharted territory. And your life does not have to be hard. And it is okay if it becomes so hard that you decide it's ultimately not for you. And I think sometimes what I run into is people just struggling and struggling and struggling and working and working and working. And it's like, okay, but you actually don't have to do this. So friendly reminder that you can explore polyamory and ultimately decide that it's not for you or not for you right now. Right? We only have so much emotional bandwidth, so much time in a day. And if maybe you're in graduate school or you're starting a new job or you just moved to a new city and you have too many other balls in the court to be able to juggle those with the kind of big fiery ball that is opening up your relationship, it's okay to press pause or to wait.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because we actually went through something along those lines where we both realized we needed to press pause. And that was okay, because this is so fluid. It's always changing. We are one thing today. Next year, we may be something else, but it shouldn't be hard.
Right.
This should be something that is adding to our lives and not just like working all of the time. And I almost get irritated, not irritated. That might be the wrong word. When I hear people go, "Oh, this is so much work." I'm like, I don't want this to be work.
Sure.
I want this to be something that I enjoy doing. The conversations, the hard conversations that we have, I enjoy those because I know we're going to come out the other end and we're going to be expanding. And so I embrace that. And I hope that's what our listeners gain from, when they hear our podcast, that they're being added to, they're growing, they're expanding and opening up for even more love and more conversations. And
that's a great point that there is work, but if you're doing it right, it's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
exciting.
It's a wild ride you can go on in non-monogamy, but it's not like a roller coaster that you can't get off once it starts.
Right. Great comment.
You can kind of check out whenever you want to and take a break. And it really did help us to take that sort of year off.
Yeah.
And I think it was partially something you brought up. It gave us a chance to really reevaluate our why. And I think we had realized that our why had shifted a bit. Whereas early on, it was just like, hey, I just want to have sex with some people. It was very shallow, and it's definitely shifted over the years. So we needed a break.
Yeah.
And something that I think is helpful that maybe CrossFit athletes in particular will understand is I really like this idea of like proof of concept, right? Like when you're in a non-monogamous relationship and you have proof that your partner is going to quote unquote come back to you after having a dalliance with somebody else, you then believe that and you know that you can handle that. And I think this is somewhat similar to CrossFit where it's like, okay, well, I can't squat. I've never squat cleaned a 205-pound bar before. And so when that barbell's in front of me and I haven't done it, it's a really different emotional and mental experience than when one day I pick it up and do it and it's easy peasy.
Yeah.
And so I think it's okay that there are going to be times when you feel uncertain and you have to put yourself out there and you got to put all of your equipment on and call on your support groups to, lift this bar or quote unquote endure this new relationship milestone. But once you have proof of concept and you know that you can handle it, it becomes easier.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I think that's really how we've kind of done it. I mean, we've taken very slow baby steps all along the way, and sometimes we take a little step and we go, probably not for us. But we come together, we talk about it and go, hey, no harm, no foul. We'll move on to the next thing. But most of the time when we take those steps together, we realize it wasn't as scary as we thought it was going to be. It was just all joy and fun. And then we potentially move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us where people can find you. What do you want people to know about you? Where can they look and see your work and events and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's great. I'm on Instagram at Gabrielle Kassel, and I post most of my articles there as well as events that I'm hosting, pleasure product reviews, and so on. And you can really find me and my work anywhere on the internet that covers sex and well-being. So Cosmopolitan, Women's Health, Men's Health, Shape, Well and Good, Self, and so on. So anytime you're on your favorite magazine's website, please look for my name and give my articles a read.
Very cool. And hopefully one of our Naughty Gym events soon.
Yes, I would love that. Please invite me. Please have me.
Well, we appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I think we're going to have maybe another quick talk when we hang up here. But thank you for coming on here and giving us some of your time. We know you're busy, and we always appreciate that when people are willing to chat for a while.
Cool. Thanks, April. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.